being a yoga teacher, I found that my safe place on my mat was the perfect place to start healing my relationship with my body and with myself in the wake of childlessness.
Welcome to the You Are Not Your Trauma podcast, a show that reminds you that you are not alone, your experiences matter, and you are not defined by what you've been through. Each week, you will hear from the host and invited guests who have either personal or professional experience with trauma. They will share their stories and strategies for overcoming past wounds and beginning the journey toward healing and wholeness. Now, here's your host, a gifted speaker, author, coach, and entrepreneur, Harriet M. Harris.
Hello, and welcome to a brand new episode of You Are Not Your Trauma, the podcast that brings hope, healing, and inspiration to those who have experienced life's most challenging moments. I'm your host, Harriet M. Harris, and I am so glad that you're here today. I hope that this show is an important part of your healing journey. Now, in a world where the narrative of family often follows a conventional script that includes parenthood, for some, not achieving it can feel isolating, especially when it's not their choice. For those who are childless, not by choice, the path can be complex, filled with deep grief, loss, and the ongoing journey to find peace in a life that's turned out differently than they've planned. If you're on this journey, this episode is a gentle reminder that your story is valid, your emotions are significant, and your resilience is remarkable. Now, in this episode, we're going to explore this tender subject with our guest, Sarah Jane Smith, who will share her deeply personal experience of childlessness without a choice. We'll talk about how self-compassion can be a light through the fog of grief and how finding community can provide a compass to guide you back to yourself. Sarah is an embodiment teacher and coach who has found strength and purpose in her personal experiences with childlessness. Through her work, she creates a space for women to find healing, embrace agency, and to see possibility in life's unexpected turns. Welcome, Sarah Jane. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hello, thank you. What a lovely intro. Very happy to be here.
I'm so glad to have you. It's really and truly an honor to have you here, Sarah Jane. So could you please just share a little bit about yourself and the work that you do as an embodiment coach?
Yeah. So I'm Sarah Jane. I live on a small island off the west coast of Canada. It's called Salt Spring Island. I live here with my husband and our dog. I've been a long-time yoga teacher, and being a yoga teacher, I found that my safe place on my mat was the perfect place to start healing my relationship with my body and with myself in the wake of childlessness. So using the foundations of being a yoga teacher, along with my studies of mindful self-compassion, I've created a program, both one-on-one and group programs for fellow women who are childless not by choice, that help integrate grief, amplify agency, and embody possibility using the foundations of grief tending, embodiment, and self-compassion.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. But before we dive into our conversation, we're going to take a very quick commercial break. So stick around. We will be right back.
We are on an incredible journey together. sharing stories of resilience, hope, and the power of healing. To extend the reach and impact of the You Are Not Your Trauma movement, we've launched the Give 5 to Change Lives campaign. With just $5, you can contribute to developing invaluable resources like our upcoming You Are Not Your Trauma app, healing journal, and expanded podcast content. Every dollar and every share contributes to helping bring healing and hope to more people. We invite you to join this movement. Visit giving.youarenotyourtrauma.com to contribute. Together, we can change lives one heart at a time.
Okay, we are back. And again, I am here with our remarkable guest, Sarah Jane, continuing our conversation on embracing childlessness without a choice. Now, Sarah, I'd like to invite you to share with us your own story, if you're comfortable.
Yeah, thank you. So my journey to childlessness was over about an 8-year period. It included multiple pregnancy losses, a long period of unexplained infertility, and then due to a chronic illness, I had a hysterectomy. And so that was in 2018. So having the hysterectomy was the final sort of line in the sand, as it were, that ended my journey of trying to expand my family by having a child.
Okay. Now, how has your personal experiences shaped your approach to healing?
Good question. Well, as I said before, being a student and a teacher of mindful self-compassion, that was one of the first places, along with my yoga practice, that I started. And knowing that self-compassion was a gateway to contained grieving. So during my journey to childlessness, there was a lot of grief-inducing experiences. But because I was continuing to try to have a child, I didn't feel like I could fully let myself grieve and keep the hope of trying to have a child alive, because those two things to hold at the same time are a lot.
Yes.
And it felt like, and I know this not to be true now, but it felt like grieving, allowing myself to grieve, was almost accepting that I wouldn't have a child. And so going through that experience while I was still trying, it felt almost, well, it just felt too much, to let myself go into the grief and try and keep the hope and the momentum alive of trying to have a child. And I also didn't really know how to grieve, and also if I was really allowed. Pregnancy loss and infertility are so common, but they're not really things, when people talk about grief, they don't really talk about those kinds of things, right? It's usually like death loss. So, something like that seems like an acceptable thing to grieve over and around. However, pregnancy loss, even from medical practitioners, it was like, oh, well, that's too bad. Don't worry, try again. It'll happen for you. There was no sort of take time, be with your feelings. There was none of that. Nobody ever mentioned grief. So I also didn't think that was kind of allowed, as it were. And now I know that it's that type of grief is referred to as disenfranchised grief, like a grief that's not really recognized. And I fully think that if anybody experiences any kind of loss or change, they have the full right to grieve in any
Absolutely.
way that
Yeah,
they want to.
I agree.
Mhm.
Now, you
Mhm.
mentioned self-compassion in your answer here. Self-compassion is a powerful tool in healing. So, what are some initial steps that someone can take to create or cultivate self-compassion on this unique journey?
Mhm. Yeah, so self-compassion has three components, right? The first one is mindfulness, second one is shared humanity, and the third one is kindness. So the first one, mindfulness, is being aware of how your inner narrative is going, like how you're speaking to
Mm-hmm.
yourself and how you're
Mm-hmm.
relating to your own experience, whether that
Right.
is, your experience of your body or experience of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So noticing that, I think, is the first step of working towards self-compassion. And the idea isn't to cover up hard feelings with
Right.
kindness. We're not talking about like recognizing that you feel sad and telling yourself to not feel sad, or like
Mm-hmm.
trying to say, oh well, you have other things to be happy about. So it's
Right.
not a pushing to the side, it's not a covering over. It's more like within yourself, like we have as humans have a full range of complex emotions, and we can hold them
Right.
at the same time, right? So a part of me can be sad, and while
Mm-hmm.
another part of me uh, cannot be sad.
So
And
two
I
things can be
can,
true at once.
exactly. And so I can turn towards the part of myself that is sad and offer
Mm-hmm.
kindness. Or I can
Mm,
turn towards the part of myself that feels ashamed and offer kindness. You can
I
even
like
turn
that.
towards the parts of myself that feel angry and offer
Mm,
kindness. So
okay.
that's true self-compassion practice. And the other piece of that, the shared humanity, is
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that you're not alone. There's so many
Yes.
other people who have gone through or are going through, that might not be exactly the same as you have or I have, but something similar. So
Right.
recognizing that allows us to come out of isolation, which is a really big step towards this sense of belonging and finding community, which is what you mentioned in the opening.
Absolutely. And that actually leads to my next question. Just the fact that community connections do play a crucial role in healing from trauma. So,
Mhm.
how do you foster these connections among the women that you work with that are facing childlessness without a choice? And what impact have you seen it have?
Mhm. So I do group programs. And so that brings together women who don't know each other, from all over the world. And we go through a 3-month program together. And through that, I've seen women say for the first time, like, I've never felt so validated,
Mm,
because they are hearing somebody else uh, be vulnerable and say things that they only
nice.
thought that they were feeling, that
Mm-hmm.
have an experience that they thought they were the only one, because
Right.
they have, that has been their experience in real life. Maybe they don't know any other people who are childless.
Right.
Maybe they do, but because it's kind of a taboo subject, people don't really talk
Mm-hmm.
about it.
Yeah.
There's many, many of us out there, but it's almost like we're hidden in plain sight.
Right.
So through being validated in community, and being able to speak freely and openly about your experience, has an impact on finding the right words so that you can have conversations with others, that
Mm-hmm.
deciding how you want to talk about your story, and kind of almost practicing it in a safe place where you know it's going to be accepted, you know people understand,
Right.
helps build confidence, and so that you can then go out and maybe start to engage and share a little bit with people in real life.
So it sounds like from what you've explained that those community connections align a lot with that shared humanity, because they are connecting with people that are helping them see that they are not alone.
Exactly. And then we get to show kindness and empathy to each other, which then has kind of like a self-fulfilling effect.
Okay, so Sarah Jane, can you tell me what are some common misconceptions about the journey of childlessness without a choice that you'd like to address or clarify for our audience?
Well, the first misconception is that there is only one way to childlessness, and that is through infertility. There's so many ways to childlessness. It can be not finding somebody to have a child with while you're still able. It could be other health considerations apart from infertility, and health meaning physical health and mental health. It could be through having a certain history in your family that you are wary of wanting to pass on. And so while it might sound like a choice, you decide that having children isn't the best thing. It could be through feeling like you have to be at a certain place financially before having children, and maybe not getting there, but maybe not getting there at all, or getting there before your childbearing years come to an end.
Right.
So I think that is the biggest misconception, that there's just one way, and that there's some kind of hierarchy in it. There are many ways, and there's many ways that people see as a choice. Like perhaps your partner already has children. So you meet somebody, they already have children, and they decide that they don't want any other children, and but you then stay with your partner. Is that technically a choice? Like, it's not a very
that's a very good point. That is a very good point, because there are women who experience just that sometimes.
Absolutely.
Sarah Jane, I'm really glad that you gave these additional examples to extend it past infertility, right? You gave some very good examples of, not finding someone to have the child with, whether mental or physical health concerns, family history, or even feeling like you're need to be in a certain financial space in life before you begin that journey. I really appreciate you sharing that, because you're very correct. There are so many different ways to be in this situation, to be on this journey of childlessness without a choice, because like, as you just explained, if there are other factors that play into it, is it really not your choice or not? So thank you. I'm glad, because I feel like that input could really shift a person's perspective, who could be maybe being too hard on themselves, like, not looking at it as if it's not their choice, or not, as you said, in certain situations, not the best choice because of a variety of reasons. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think it's important to talk about this sort of definition of choice, and what is a choice and what isn't a choice. Because if we gatekeep the the label or the title or the
Yeah.
group that is childless not by choice. And there's many women who end up sort of in this no woman's land without any support, and also again feeling like they maybe don't have the right to grieve, and that they don't deserve some compassion for how things have gone in their life. And that's just not true.
That is so true. Thank you for sharing that. Now, Sarah Jane, for someone who may be listening, who's dealing with the trauma of childlessness, not by choice, what is one piece of advice that you would offer them to start embodying possibility today?
I think recognizing grief and allowing time and space to acknowledge the loss. And it could be a physical loss, if we're talking pregnancy loss, or chronic illness is involved, or some sort of physical aspect that could be that kind of physical loss. But there's also so many other losses that go with childlessness that kind of extend throughout someone's life. Sort of loss of identity, loss of how you thought your life was going to go, the loss of making your parents grandparents, the loss of becoming a future grandparent yourself, and all of those things that would go along with having a child, like hosting birthday parties, first day of school pictures, Halloween costumes, like all of those things, which can be a lot when you start to think about it. So I'm not suggesting to, make a giant list of all of the possible losses, because that would be overwhelming and way too much. But just when time and space allows, and when it comes up, to allow yourself to grieve. There's certain, if someone's on social media, there's certain times of the year that become more triggering, back to school photo time.
That is
like
so
Halloween,
true.
When people are posting photos of their kids trick-or-treating and kind of doing things to acknowledge how you're feeling, and also maybe taking a little bit of space, that could be a time to maybe not go on social media for a few days. So that's a way that you can recognize your grief as well, is by setting some boundaries and some protections.
I like that. Setting boundaries. And I think that's really good advice for someone who may get triggered, during those times, because I think a lot of times no one really is thinking about both sides, right? We're just happily out there sharing our things and not really considering it. So it's not like it's to be inconsiderate. It's more of, this, I think it's kind of something you mentioned, like the different journeys, like we all have them. They're all different. And as we express them differently, then it can be, heartbreaking for some. So I do like that, setting boundaries, especially certain times of the year or certain seasons, school starting, certain holidays. So that's great advice. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate everything that you shared, because this has been so insightful. And it is my hope and prayer that anyone who is or has been on the journey of childlessness without a choice is able to take some of what you've shared today with us and really use it to begin to shift the way they're thinking. I think a different perspective is always very valuable. And I really like what you've been able to share with us today, Sarah Jane. So we're going to take, I'm sorry, what were you saying?
I just said thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. But we're going to take another brief pause, but we'll be right back and we'll wrap up today's episode.
You have every right to be successful. You have every right to be happy. You have every right to live the life you dream of. But your negative thoughts are holding you back from achieving those things, and it's time to stop listening to them. Sound familiar? If so, then this book is for you. Stop Stopping Your Success, a guided journal to break free from the negative thoughts holding you back from your dreams, is available now on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com. Or get an author autographed copy at www.stopstoppingyoursuccess.com.
Okay, we are back. Now, Sarah Jane, I want to thank you again for joining me today. Your insights, they aren't just like a guiding light for others on this path, but they also help illuminate this experience for the world to better understand. And I think that is invaluable. So can you tell me if you have any final thoughts for our listeners today?
Yeah. Finding community and seeing and hearing as an experience, your experience or a similar experience reflected back is very validating. So there are a number of free childless not by choice groups on Facebook. And so if you can handle social media, then that is a great place. You can just search in the search function, childless not by choice. I moderate a group, a very large group, over 4,000 childless women in the group, and it's called Childless by Circumstance, Not by Choice. So that is one of many options. So finding community, I'd say, is a really great place to start to step out from isolation.
Yes, because I can say for sure that a lot of times isolation is what captures you and holds you captive when you are experiencing some of those, when you're going through things that you feel like no one else is going through, or you're feeling alone. So I know myself personally, I have isolated when I felt that it was just me, because I think, and I say this often, is that when we're going through the experience, it seems heightened because we're the ones that's walking through it. So it's a little bit more difficult to see, unless it's someone in our immediate circle. It's really hard to see that there are other people out there. And I can say for sure that finding someone who has gone through the experience similar to yours, maybe not exact, but definitely similar, is always really helpful. So thank you so much for sharing that. And again, thank you for coming on the show and sharing your experience with us and what you do and how you help and encourage women who are experiencing childlessness without a choice. You've given us a lot to think about, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Now, as we wrap up today's episode, I do want to leave you all with this thought. In our life's garden, each experience is a seed. Some seeds grow into unexpected blooms, adding unique colors and textures to our landscape. I want you to hold on to this as you nurture your life's garden. Now, a little challenge for our listeners. I want you to think about what seeds in your life have blossomed into surprising and beautiful experiences. I want you to share your stories with us using the hashtag Life's Garden, and be sure to tag You Are Not Your Trauma podcast. Your share could help someone else. And I look forward to reading and hearing and seeing your inspiring stories. Now, you can tag us on any of our platforms, Facebook, Instagram. You can even do a TikTok video. I'll watch those too. Now, thanks again to each of you for tuning in to this week's episode of You Are Not Your Trauma podcast. If you found today's episode helpful, please don't forget to share it with someone who can benefit from the information shared. Also, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the show. You can check out the website, www.youarenotyourtrauma.com, to leave feedback, request to be a guest on the show, subscribe to the show, get information on show guests, or to get information about advertising on You Are Not Your Trauma podcast. You can connect with You Are Not Your Trauma podcast on Facebook and Instagram at You Are Not Your Trauma podcast. And if you have a story to share, email me at contact@harrietmharris.com. Remember, your life story is powerful. Your healing journey is yours to walk. And within you lies a wealth of possibilities. Until next time, take care of your inner garden, stay connected with your community, and honor every part of your journey. And please remember, you are not your trauma.